morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you are. As I told you in the previous meeting, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce this double event because we have today, and we had in the previous meeting, the directors of 4 firms that are among the most active in the contemporary debate about the evolution of the architectural culture in China. In the first meeting, we had 2 firms based in Shanghai, Atelier des Haus with Liu Yichuan, and Atelier Z Plus with Zhang Bin. Today, instead, we have 2 firms based in Beijing, Donggong for Vector Architects and Shu Tiantian for DnA Design and Architecture. So first of all, good afternoon to you all and welcome virtually in Mantova for Mantova Architettura.
Thank you.
We saw many projects, one in particular for each firm, that are different from the dimensional, functional, and typological point of view, and different for the place. In the first event, we saw several interventions in Shanghai, a series of industrial sites along the Huangpu River with Atelier des Haus, and a system of service stations conceived as urban infrastructures with Atelier Z Plus. Today, instead, we are going to talk about an hotel in a former sugar mill built in the 60s in Guangxi in southern China, and a leisure and sports center in Lishui between Shanghai and Fuzhou, and other projects of the 2 firms in the recent years. Projects that are connected by there being relevant interpretations of the relationship between architecture and the fluvial landscape, considering the waterfront as a new space for meeting and interacting, for enhancing the relationship with the natural environment, and for giving the opportunity of transforming a rear in a front. In the first lecture, we are going to talk with Gongdong from Vector Architects. He is the founder and the principal of this firm that is based in Beijing. He is a visiting professor at the University of Illinois and has been teaching at the Tsinghua University since 2014. The project we are going to talk about today, the Alila Yangshuo Hotel in Guangxi, consists in the reuse of a former sugar mill that is surrounded by a natural karst landscape that is one of the most suggestive, I think, of the whole China. This intervention is, on the one hand, emblematic of the experimentation by Vector Architects about the architectural reuse, a modality that was developed also in projects as the one for the M. Woods Museum that aims to create a new access point and to define a clear visual identity of a former industrial deposit, and the one for the Captain's House on the Huangqi Peninsula that regards the structural reinforcement, the extension and the redefinition of the openings of an existing residential building. On the other hand, it seems to tell a mutation of the Chinese architectural culture regarding the way of interpreting the relationship between architecture and nature. 60 years ago, in the years of the decentralization of the industrial sector, the construction of a productive settlement in such a characterized landscape wasn't so unusual. Today, instead, thanks to the revaluation of several values connected with history and connected with the local traditions, marvelous places as this one become sceneries to preserve, oases for relaxing and contemplating, references to enhance through careful and respectful gestures. These aspects will be deepened by Gondong in his lecture, and so I thank him for his availability and his presence at this new edition of Mantova Architettura.
Thank you for inviting. It's a great pleasure to share some of our projects and architecture thoughts with you guys today. I'm going to sharing my screen. Today, I'm going to talk about two projects. One is Captain's House. It's a renovation project. Another one is the one you actually introduced, Alida Yangshuo. It's another hotel project. And both of them are actually tightly relevant to waterfront. My title today, Mediating and Connecting, it's actually it's actually reflecting my understanding of when we place a new architecture into a certain context. Sometimes it's social, sometimes it's urban, or it's natural. The role of architecture, for me, it's not the new architecture shouldn't be totally submissive, either superimposing. I always believe in there is a very fine line that architecture has to discover to let this new intervention of architecture could be mediating the different conditions, different factors of the context and weaving them together into a new harmony. And the other keywords, connecting, I never believe architecture it's an object only. It has the capability to work as a medium to connect things, to connect the people with people, people with the society, and people with the nature. I think this is our two very major and powerful energy of architecture. So I'm starting my lecture with the first project. As I just mentioned, Captain House renovation is located in the very southern part of China. The red spot is the location of the project. China is really a very big country. So sometimes I think it's intriguing. It's also very challenging for Chinese architects, even though we work within one country, but because of the geographical distance. So if you work some project in Beijing, Beijing is around in this area, or comparing with you work something to the very south part of China, it could be very different. The cultural, the weather, the climate, the geographic features. So it's really challenging, but at the same time, I think it's really providing many opportunities for architects to face the different issues and try to find the accurate solution. I think that's an intriguing process. This project is actually in the village. It's not in the urban area. And this photograph shows you an overview, a bird's eye of the village. It's located along a peninsula in the local area. And again, the red spot is the location of the house. There's a very interesting characteristic of this location because it's in the neck of this entire peninsula and facing both two directions of ocean. This one is facing east, southeast. Another one, of course, is the northwest. And this two pieces of oceans has very different kind of character. The south part is always peaceful, poetic landscape, but at the same time, the north part is like a busy harbor. So these are all ocean landscape, but they always appear very different in terms of the atmosphere. This is actually very important when we design the project. So this is what I described, as you can see, a peaceful, always very calm ocean landscape. At the same time, it's a very busy harbor on the other side. And that's a picture we took before the design. And the house in the middle is the original condition of the structure we have to renovate. As you can see, it's not a very pretty village, but I went there for many times because of the project. It makes me feel real. I still can see different generations. Most of them are fishing people. They rely on fishing industry. And when you see the physical context, you still can figure the different generations of architecture. This pitch roof stone masonry wall, this kind of structure were built about 300 or 400 years ago around the Qing dynasty. And this kind of two-story or three-story cement structure were built about 30 or 40 years ago after the revolution, the liberation of China. And these high-rise buildings are actually built within the recent 15 years. It's the real estate project in this local area. So you still can feel the evolution of the context. And that's the structure we have to face. Two-story structure, basically it's a masonry structure with some limited concrete reinforcement. But there's many problems of this existing structure. The water leaking problem, and the structure is not safe because of after 30 years of use. Plus this, the captain, he wanted to add the third floor in this current structure because in the summertime, there's always friends and the relatives coming from different other places around China to gather in this local area because the weather here is very comfortable in the summer. So they need a certain area to accommodate the guest. So that's basically the task of our design. And this is shows you some very serious condition about the existing structure, the structure problem, the water leaking problem. But no matter how problematic the structure is, the location of the house is really amazing. This is their house before the renovation. It's right on the cliff facing to the ocean. And that's the existing condition inside their house. These are a captain's couple, and they have a daughter. She's the daughter, and they have a son. It's a very typical family in the local area, and that's the interior style of their living space. So the captain in the middle, this is myself. And this guy is important because this entire design is really tightly relevant to the structure reinforcement. So his name is Xiao Congzhen. He's a very capable, competent structure engineer. We have been working together for many years. So we actually studied many options and potentials, how we reinforce the existing structure, and eventually we choose attaching a layer of concrete, which is only about 12 centimeter thickness of concrete and attaching to the backside of the original brick masonry wall to reinforce the entire strength of the structure, at the same time to make it capable to support the third floor, which is the new addition of the house. And because of this reinforcement of the structure, we do have some freedom to re-manipulate the layout. On the left side, this plan shows you the original layout of their house. But because of the stronger structure, so we can move some of the program into a more suitable location. For example, originally there's one toilet right here to block the view of the ocean, also block the light and air. But now, because of the new involvement of the structure, we can relocate the toilet to the, you can see this is the back wall of their house. So we did some remanipulation of the layout to make it more reasonable in terms of this very specific location of the architecture. The second floor, we did almost the same thing. The two toilets originally in the very important location, and we relocate them along the back wall, and we can gain more the facade area for inviting more light and air, and also create a visual connection from inside to the outside. But the third floor, which is the new floor of the project, is basically the multi-function room for their family. In the regular time, it's their leisure space, and also they are religious people. They believe in Christians, so this is also their family chapel. But in the summer, more people can live in the space together with the family. So if you say the lower two floor is basically a very austere renovation, but the third floor is we give the new shape of the house, and eventually we choose a shape of an arch, but structurally it's the barrel vault structure. There are many reasons that why we eventually make the decision like this. First of all, the barrel vault, they have inherent directional quality. Remember that the peninsula is here, and we have two pieces of ocean along both sides. So we trust this kind of shape of space can naturally connect these two sides together and introduce this ocean views into their living space. That's a very important reason why we do that. But at the same time, the shape of the space is simultaneously the shape of the structure. So we don't need to build column and beams to support the space. When we finish the shell, the casting the concrete, the project is almost done. So this is another reason. There are many other reasons we can, I will explain later on following the pictures of the projects. So that's the basically axiometric diagram showing you the structure of the entire project. The lower two floors are the daily space, but the top floor is more about spiritual space. But that's from an architect's point of view. I will show you a very short clip of video to give you a sense of how this building was built. It's still a very primitive way of construction because the entire village is far away from the city, and some very narrow alleys, they don't allow the big machine to approach to the construction site. So the entire process of construction is really handmade in a way. But in China, if you work in Beijing or Shanghai, this first tier of the metropolitan city, you have very developed industrial technology already. So that's why I explain, even though we have to design in the same country, but we always face very different conditions. The architects has to be able to find the solution. So this is how they carry out this cement to the construction site, because the big machine cannot approach the site. So everything, you see the gear rolling up the barrels, and then they really cast the concrete by hand. After all this effort, this is the finishing condition. The house is right here against the ocean, and that's the village around. And at nighttime, it's more standing out because the contemporary tectonic detail allow us to do more transparent materials. Comparing with the other houses around, you can see it's actually like a glowing lantern at night. But in the daytime, it's more blending into the context, maybe because the material palette we select, the concrete, the paint, so the building is more harmonic, more into a kind of harmony with the context. And that's one of the facade. So the lower two floors, as you can see in this picture, is basically renovation of the original structure. But the top floor is an added new space. Between this new and old, we intentionally leave a 30 centimeters gap to somehow, how to say, show you, remind you there is some difference between this new and old. But they become an entire architecture between this upper part and the lower part. And besides the overall space, we have another design detail, which is the windows, because we add a layer of the structure along the original wall. So we have a certain thickness of the wall we can play with. So each window is not merely a thin cut opening on the wall, but we try to make them as a space within the interior space and the outside nature. So it's a small room inserting into the interior space and the outside space. So it's a series of such kind of space, and it's all this. It's all about the different windows. And this is some details when we design this kind of window room. This is one of the examples. It's the window along their living space. So you can see the window in the corner. You can sit in a couch and you can drink a cup of tea and stay there, read a book. So the window become a kind of active space, can affect the real human behavior rather than just a cut opening. Yeah. And there is some operable pane in this window design to allow you to control the air and the light. Depends on the comfortable you feel with. That's the very top floor, which is the third floor. I explained is the family chapel. It's also a multifunction space for the family. And right now they actually play a running machine inside the space, and they do karaoke and they do different kind of things inside the space. So this angle actually is facing the peaceful ocean landscape I just explained earlier. But on the other side is facing the busy harbor. Actually, the ocean landscape, the view for the family is the way of they understand the landscape is different than architect, and it's different than visitors. Because for us, maybe it's just a very beautiful landscape. For them, it's the resource of their living. And every time when the captain returned from the fishing, he will park the boat in the harbor. So they can literally see their father or their husband return from the ocean. And the ocean 10 years ago, when they go out to fish, it's still kind of dangerous because the technology at that moment is not as developed as the current situation. So ocean for them, it's a much more complex a company or a feeling comparing with the pure visitors. I think this is quite important for architect to realize that. That's the daughter's bedroom. So you can see we actually take advantage of the thickness of the wall to make some furnitures and to allow some behavior to happen in the corner. Yeah. That's one of the windows on the top mezzanine level. A small operable pane open up to the ocean. That's some angle from the village. So you can see this juxtaposition between this old 300 or 400 years of this village house together with a very modern contemporary architecture insertion. That's the twilight condition. Well, after the entire project, they treated me a karaoke. So this is the image we actually sing together. That's the captain, and that's the wife of the captain. Seems like they are happy with what I did. I received this series of pictures actually last year, which is almost a couple years after the completion of the project. And this is something really make me, as an architect, happy with, because I really see the change of their living conditions and even their facial expression. I feel a subtle difference between the before or after the project. So this really make me to believe that architecture really has the capability to dignify the regular people's life. All right, so that's the first one I presented today. The second one is the hotel project. It's a Lila Yangshuo project. The red spot is the locational project. So it's also belonging to the very southern part of China. Yeah, it's right here in the Guangxi province. And the local area is very famous because of its landscape. We call 桂林山水甲天下, meaning that the local mountain water quality is the toppest quality in China. And that's a closer bird's eye view. So the red line is the site of the project. And this is the Lijiang River, which is turning the corner against the site. So it's really an intriguing place for an architect to design a project here. And that's the mountain water. This is the site. So this is the Lijiang River, and that's the Karstic mountain. It's almost like a vertical mountain around the area. So besides this beautiful mountain water landscape, we have another important factor we have to consider is this sugar mill factory, which was built in early 1960s. So if you see this is the magazine of the Liberation Army. It's a very famous magazine among the mainstream media in China. And this Yangshuo sugar mill was on the cover in 1972. So meaning this factory actually along the history, it's a very important settlement in the local industrial context. But in the 1980s, because of the environmental protection policy, because of the government, so the entire factory was shut down. But fortunately, they didn't demolish it. Maybe because the project is located not right in the center of the town. It's actually 3 kilometers away from the town center. So nobody really cared about this industrial remains, I guess. So very luckily, the entire structure is still remained. But the condition is kind of very severe, in a very severe condition. That's the inside condition before this entire design project. Yeah. And I had a chance to really have a lunch with some old people in the local area, and all of them, they work in the factory when they're at their younger time. And it's very interesting when they talk about the experience when they work for the sugar mill factory. They are very emotional, and this guy even cried. I still remember that moment. So it made me feel that this entire structure is not only a physical identity of the local area, but at the same time, it has a very strong emotional link or emotional connection to the local people. And every time when we started a project, I used to do sketches because I think this is a very effective way to establish a kind of connection between the architect and the physical context. So this is the very first time I went to the site, all the sketches I did. And little by little, the design ideas start showing up. There's one thing very clear is no matter what we do for the project, the center complex, the original existing industrial structure, is still the major role to dominate the entire site, because the entire structure will be transformed into a hotel. So we have to add new volumes in this very limited site. So we eventually we use the new volume to flunk on both sides of the original structure to make the original piece still a very dominating figure of the entire compound. So that's the original structure, and this darker lines shows you that the intention, how we add the new volumes on the site. And also we, in the very beginning of the project, will make many comparisons about the different design strategies, how we interpret this new and old. Eventually, the volume or the profile of the new structure is very horizontal. I guess there are two factors will affect this decision. One is that we have to make a modest kind of attitude towards this central part, which is the existing structure. So we try to make the new volume as simple as possible. And the second factor is that the surrounding mountains is very vertical because of the karstic characteristic of this certain geographic feature. So the horizontal or the horizontality somehow can complement this verticality of the natural mountain. So that's the major two factors why we select this very horizontal profile in this location. Yeah. And all the spatial experience for the new volume is basically a carved out volumetric relationship, because we don't want to make this volume too complicated. So everything is carved in to create a kind of meandering experience, that almost like when you walk inside a big rock or when you walk inside a mountain. So that's some pictures showing you the adjacent mountain in the local area in the ancient time. When villagers try to cross the mountain from one side to another, normally they carved inside the rock to make this path. So this somehow inspired us yeah, a little. So this is why in the new building volume, we try to use the same carving out design strategy to create a spatial experience. That's the early stage of the model study. And this is the schematic model showing you the basic layout of the entire compound. So the central part is the factory and transformed into public programs like lavori, restaurant, cafe, but the both sides are flanked by the volumes of the guest house, the guest rooms. So that's the elevation. So you can see continuous carved in space inserted into the volume. So that's the basic master plan layout. And that's the national driveway along the project. And this is the river of the Lijiang River. So the entire project is actually a kind of connection from this more urban atmosphere into this very natural atmosphere. So the first floor, some basic layout of the public programs and also the two guest room volumes along sides. I'd like to spend a little bit more time about the detail of this project because there's a major design task that we have to solve the relationship between this new intervention of architecture with the old existing structure. So the material is very important for us, try to create this kind of harmony. And the original structure, which is the factory, is actually a masonry structure. It's made by bricks. So this is a picture of this sugar mill. So you can see how beautiful this old structure is. But for us, we are building 40 years later or 50 years later. We don't want to simply use the same kind of masonry brick or to copy the old detail to the new structure. We like to find a way, at one hand, representing the current technology, the potentials of the new material, the new technology, but at the same time, respecting the old brick and an old atmosphere. So we spent quite an amount of time and energy to study this detail. And that's the schematic model when we study this certain material. And we actually, eventually we choose a kind of hollowed concrete block. It's also a stacking kind of construction method. But because of the hollow block allow more light and air to penetrate the surface, so the entire architecture will feel lighter. It's different than the very heavy kind of feeling of the brick building. Yeah. But to achieve this kind of detail, it needs a certain way to solve the technical problems, which I will show you later. And this is from the inside. When you look out, you can feel how the light will be filtered into the space. And little by little, we have to make a bigger model. This is 1-to-1 mock-up inside our office, but these are not made by concrete. These are made by foam. We try to use this kind of design method to test the transparency and the opacity of the surface of the architecture. And after half a year, we went into this execution process. So we try to collaborate with this kind of manufacturer factories in Nanjing, which is a kind of very developed manufacturer in China. But eventually, because of the budget and because of the problem of the transportation, so we give up the collaboration. Eventually, the client, which now is one of my very good friends, he actually made a decision opening up his own factory, very adjacent to the project. I think that's a very smart decision because it saved a lot of money. At the same time, because later on, the entire architecture needs many pieces within a customized dimension, because he owns the factory, so it's very easy to conduct this kind of production. Otherwise, you can imagine it could be a nightmare. And these are some pictures showing you in the beginning how we test different kind of techniques when we try to make this concrete block. And that's the small factory right against the construction site. It's about 20 or 30 people in terms of the size of this small factory. Yeah. So this is the process when they try to make each of the block. So it's basically like a casting concrete technique. They have to build this PVC mold first, and they have to place the rebar inside, and then they will cast the cement into the mold. And eventually they invent this small machine to push out the concrete block with the mold. This is actually very tricky. And we work together with the local workers. Eventually we make this solution of the problem. This is some pictures showing you the process along the way when they're making the concrete block. So there's also a kind of smart solution how we solve this entire tectonic details. I will explain later on. Just pay attention to this small temper rod. It's actually very important for the entire masonry structure. That's when they start the construction. Start stacking this concrete block. So because this entire wall has to be able to resist the lateral force, so we need to have these rebars to be hidden inside the wall. And the way we hide it is that the entire wall is made of two major materials. One is the concrete block I just mentioned, and within each layer of the concrete block, we have a local stone, a solid stone block. So this is a combination of an industrialized material and a local material. And for the block, we actually can penetrate because we can drill a hole in the middle and the rebar can easily penetrate. But for the concrete block, remember that half circle temper rod when they cast the concrete block. So this will make a circle, a full circle when you put these two blocks together. So the rebar could be hidden within the circle. So this is a small trick of the detail. And the even more difficult thing we have to solve is how you insert the very top piece to the wall, because the rebar has to be eventually connected to the top floor. But it's very hard for you to insert the top piece after the rebar is connected. So we have to leave a space, we have to insert additional piece of the rock, and we have to connect the rebar to the upper floor, and we have to stick up the block, and then we have to insert the last piece of the concrete block. So this is we spent almost 2 weeks trying to solve this very tiny issues of the stacking, but it's really important. And eventually it's the collaboration with the architect and the local worker to make this as a doable detail eventually. Yeah. So this is almost like the finishing condition. So I will use another short video clip to give you a sense about the construction of this project. This is almost like 12 years ago when the client went to the site for the first time. It took air balloon to go all the way to up to the sky. the site. This is the site here. The site. They're really brave. I cannot do this actually. That's the pit when they start the piling work and the basement work. Casting the slab and the beam of the. We try to use larger size of the. We use the concrete structure work. So each piece of the. That's the machine I mentioned. Which, well, we do have structural engineers, but try to double check the strength of the block on the site. That's when we talk about the structure. That's the site here, and that's the landscape of the local area. That's the stacking process. Masonry. That's interior designer Judy, left side myself. Some bamboo installation in some certain area of the building. That's all the bamboo. That's interior designer myself. We were locating the trees on the site. We're also landscape designers. They're all landscape designers. That's the central point. That's the pedestal structure. This is our site. We stayed there for 3 years and worked together with the local team. That's almost the end of the construction, planting bamboo. That's the opening date of the hotel, which is 15. We also, it's like a battlefield. But at the very second day after the opening, we encountered a big flood of the Lijiang River, which is supposed to be the highest water level during the recent 50 years. So the hotel was flooded, actually. That's the road in front. But at that day, the road on the river, so you can see the boat is actually driving along the road. But after 3 months, we reopened the hotel. So the procedure is difficult, it's complicated, but eventually this architecture make a very peaceful place. I have another short clip of video which will finish my presentation today, which is the Lila Hotel, the finishing condition. Yeah. So this is the condition after everything is built, and what is the atmosphere? This is the central area or central plaza hotel, and this kind of reflecting pond is actually a fire extinguished water, but we just take advantage of it to make it plastic. Within the pond, they have a touch tap neck socket. This is a little bit similar to major face. All of this consistent carving design. That's the really amazing local vegetation. They grow very fast, interplaying. This is a hallway connecting the lobby, which is a desk, to the major guest room. The local weather allows us to take advantage of this subtle, sophisticated, comfortable weather, try to maximize the outdoor area. That's the carved in pathway along the volume. Some certain area will have some open up public. That's one of the terraces. This is what I mentioned about this bamboo installation. It's also create a kind of warm feeling to this concrete structure.
ivy is climbing up this installation. Right now, if you go there after 3 years, the vegetation grow a very that's like this very misty. That's the great. We have a narrow entry all the light. Then when you go to the room, you have to cross the bridge. That's a spot. Great. And along the river, there is this existing industrial complex. This view is taken from the village across the river. So at night, the light will come from inside, make this entire thing glowing, like natural.
Thank you.
The second lecture today regards the project for the Dusan Leisure Center near Lishui that will be presented with also other works of the firm by Tian Shu, who is the principal of DnA, Design and Architecture, also based in Beijing. Tian Shu is an architect with an international background, with a master in architecture and urban design from the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and a baccalaureate in architecture from the Tsinghua University in Beijing. We are in the Songyang district, that is a territory that hosts 150 rural villages that make its identity and culture, and that today, for the progressive urbanization, are endangered and about to disappear. The work of DnA regards the definition of a strategy of preservation and reuse of the survived settlements, and the project for the Leisure and Sports Center in Lishui. We must specify that is not an isolated occasion, but it belongs to a series of interventions as the Water Conservancy Center, the Pine Park Pavilion, the Bamboo Theater, the Chinese Herbal Garden, the Ximen Bridge, that are pavilions, museums, spaces for working, and infrastructures that are part of a strategy of territorial acupuncture that connects the enhancement of the local culture with the qualitative increase of living, working, and sports and leisure places. And that, I think, represents an intervention modality that is very important to foster and to improve, for contrasting a problem that afflicts many areas of the contemporary Chinese territory. I don't want to add anything else because today we have the possibility of talking about this project with its author, Tian Shu. So I thank you for the participation to Mantova Architettura, and I invite you to share with us your reflections about these themes.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Tian. Good afternoon and good morning. Our office is DnA, Design and Architecture. Today, I will be talking about architecture and water. Like Matteo just introduced, in the past 7 years, we have been mainly working in Songyang County, which is an agricultural county in Zhejiang province in China. And we have been taking architecture as acupunctural strategy to revitalize the rural region and also to create a urban-rural linkages. Today I will start with 3 projects in Songyang County along the Songyang River, which is the mother river of this county. It's beautiful, scenic, and also ecological river. With this, if you look at the picture, there are these green lane walkways for pedestrian and also for bicycles, providing connectivities between the rural villages and the county urban center. And these 3 projects are going to be the 3 stopping points when the county decided to plan this the Songyang River into its scenic district. The first project is the Dusan Leisure Center at the foot of the Dusan mountain, and also it's the gateway to enter the Songyang County. This is almost like the entrance of the Songyang County when you get off the highway and you stop by the leisure center and passing by, and you stop by this leisure center and also the Dusan mountain, the iconic mountain in the region. And then you enter the urban fabric of the Songyang County. So this is located in a triangular harbor next to the river, which will become a leisure center, like information, tourist information center, and facilities for water sports on the Songyang River. In a sense, we first take this idea of creating the water harbor, which is the C-shaped configuration on the water. This is also a water dam. It's an infrastructure facility providing a platform for tourist shuttles to pass through. But it's creating kind of a separated water bed. So with this water dam, it creates a stable water surface on the upper level. And then the lower level is kind of a shifting or changing water level altitudes together with the kind of a leveling with the water surface of the Songyang River. So this is a harbor welcoming the boats coming back. That's the C-shaped water dam as the infrastructure facility, and the rest of the building program is articulated into a spiral on the stable water level. That's how the buildings or the whole composition is looking like. It's kind of almost like a horizontal stretched volume, kind of a stretching out on the water and slightly undulating with the with its configuration up and down. with this spiral configuration, it's actually accommodating different architectural programs as in its interior space. For example, the Tourist Information Center, leisure tea space, and also a professional gym training center for the water sports athletes at the end of the spiral. When this form is taking all these different kind of a variety of the programs into one configuration, it's creating kind of a continuous surface or water deck on and off the building, on and off the water. So the whole spiral building is rather a landscape composition on the river, kind of a stretch out to provide different level of walkways on top of the water. It's almost like a promenade over the water. It's creating a water park. This is the aerial view taken during the Chinese New Year's Day, and with over 3,000 people in this location. So in this sense, with this kind of a composition, we first take the program as infrastructure and also as a landscape to create this dialogue with its surrounding, with the water, with the river, and also with the mountain and the different requirements, programmatic needs from different group of people, tourists, local residents, professional trainers. And with this spiral, there's also a shortcut. So if you're not only taking a walk on the deck for sightseeing or for leisure, you could also take this linear walkway as the shortcut to go through different programs. It's facing from west to east, pointing to the river. And on this shortcut, like linear walkway, you actually enter kind of a different sequence of program and in and out of the space. The whole building is constructed by the assembly timber structure, which is a modern timber structure, but we kind of coded into a darker color, so to create this kind of almost contrast when you are in or out of the space. And this is the whole timber structure also create a light structure over the water. The walkway takes you into the different program as well, tourism and also cultural program. And finally, toward the mountain to the harbor. And on this journey, because of the cut through of this linear walkway, the whole spiral is divided into different segments, and it's always shifting along this shortcut. So the curve forms become multiple layers of walkways when you are winding through this water surface. And with the shifting of the gradient of transparency and shifting over the glass curtain wall, it's creating almost like a misty atmosphere along this spiral. And the different curvy kind of corridors or pavilions provide an open space program for local residents as leisure or as entertainment space. the transparency on the curtain wall is also creating kind of a trying to have this dialogue with the water, with this location, the water, and also the nature. And that's the educational program in the building. And at the center of the spiral, there's a volume, the main space, kind of a stretch up at the to the top, to the second level, which well, led by this walkway or stair, which become the central meditation room. It's the panoramic circular room looking out to the surroundings, to the mountain. And here on this room, we had this small installation. We created this opening, a hole in the center, in the center of the roof. With the light coming into the space, it could create kind of almost a trajectory of the time and the light. And on the floor with the copper indicating different hours and of different seasons in the year, it instantly creates a kind of a dialogue between the space and the nature itself. So in general, we want this the first stopping point to enter the Songyang County, this leisure center as a tourist information center, and also as the kind of a first identity or recognition of the county with the nature, with its agriculture background, and from this point on, you will start to get to know the county in many levels, many layers. But also, and on the other hand, the whole project is a integration of infrastructure, landscape, architecture, and culture, and more. Next project is the Shimen Bridge at the outskirts of the county urban center. Well, in the past years, before the planning of this scenic district, the bridge was constantly under discussion to be demolished because of the nearby bridge for vehicles. It's not too far away. It's built in the 90s. So the original Shimen Bridge was left almost abandoned. And we propose that instead of demolishing this existing structure, we could repair, renovate this bridge by adding a new wooden lounge on top of the existing structure. And also it's the wooden lounge is following the rhythm of the wooden timber structure, is following the original structural rhythm of the bridge. So this could provide a viewing platform on the water next to the bridge. This is an ancient water dam in this region. It has a history of over 1,000 years. So the bridge becomes its own for pedestrian, but also for as a shared common space shared by two villages across the river. And the configuration of the bridge is just taken our farmer's house next door. It's the traditional rammed earth wall building in this region, but with this simple geometry and also with the rhythm cutting through the 270 meters long length, it's creating its own walking kind of a rhythm when you pass through this bridge. And it's also used by the local people as marketplace. So the rhythm when you are walking through the bridge, the linear bridge, it's indicating the structural change or structural rhythm underneath at the base of the bridge, and at the center, when there's an enlarged platform, we eliminated this wooden walkway and kind of just make it a simple open terrace. It's almost like an island in the center of the bridge with the trees. But I also want to say that the most important experience when walking through the bridge isn't about the rhythm of the architecture itself. It's rather the landscape around it, and also the water dam, the ancient water dam with over 1,000 years of history. And the sound of the water dam makes the most impression to the users, to the visitors. And this bridge also becomes the best viewing platform for this ancient water facility. But in this case, if you read through the kind of expression of water, the kind of the noise, almost like the water sound is almost like a noise. It's not the quiet sound. It's kind of taking through the whole journey, which is showing off the power of the water. So next project, I want to take this another example, how the water becomes a kind of a dominant element or expression or atmosphere in a project. This is the Water Conservancy Center next to water power plantation. That's the water power plantation under construction, and that was the building, well, in a construction process. And it's, as you read from the picture, this is the still outskirts of this county urban center along the river. And again, this is also kind of a meeting point between the urban county urban center and the villages, the rural area around. So the whole project used to be, originally it was the program for 2 office buildings and a water conservancy monitoring facility, managing offices for the whole region. It's almost like a headquarters for the water conservancy facilities in the whole county. We take this opportunity to enlarge some of the programs, for example, the archive to turn the archive into a exhibition hall, and the central monitoring center into a kind of an open educational space, and the canteen becomes a restaurant. So in this cluster of buildings, it's treated into each program is more like a fragment of the whole composition, right? And the water become merging into this building, into the whole compound. With the water surface, it could be a leisure water pool for the local people, for children. But with the building treated as almost like infrastructure, as like almost like a structure, volumes with the hidden interior space. And we want to here we want to create a kind of a contrast between these very massive volumes, stone masonry, massive volumes with the water power. In this case, there are surfaces like the pools for kids to play with, but also on the other hand, the water also create a kind of a almost like a boundary that define your activities or movements in the space. So this kind of there's a kind of counter part, the counter strengths of water with the massive, almost like a water dam, look like building volumes. Of course, it's becoming the reflection pool. But on the other hand, water surface isn't only about the kind of a scenic or kind of a serenity, the beauty. It's also showing that the kind of its own strengths of separating the programs, separating the volumes, and also separating the group of people. So this project is rather to show off the kind of aggressiveness of the water countering the buildings. The next project is in the rural region, in the mountain. This is one of our acupunctural strategy in the whole region as well. It's looking into the village context and heritage and introduce a small public program into the region, into the village, try to restore the village identity, and as well as to open to tourism to increase the revenues. So in this case, this is a Hakka village with the elementary school teacher from this village. He personally collected the largest volume of Hakka indenture collection in the whole country. Indenture means the contracts, like the legal paper when you have a business activities and you sign or documents. So basically, it's like the legal paper, and it's also almost like the foundation of the Hakka society, who's been living here for over in the past 200 years. And this is the Hakka indenture is the element we wanted to introduce as the heritage or the identity of this Shicang village. So the site is next to the mountain and also next to the river. The whole village is built along this small river, and the site is next to the mountain. Create kind of a walkway through from the smaller part of the village and connecting with the center of the village. And the building is rather treated as the background of the whole village, almost like a landscape. Bearing walls along the mountain, and this one becomes also the opportunity for us to revitalize the long lost masonry technique, a traditional masonry building technique. So if you look at this, the structure, it's totally handmade by the local skilled workers. We didn't really engage with the design. We just asked them to do what they are capable with, what they are most comfortable with. So it's becoming kind of almost like the material itself. It's the stone is collected from the local mountains and become the expression of the space, the building as well. And the whole program is treated guided by a small creek along the mountain. There's this small creek, kind of a irrigating creek, bring water from the mountain down to the village. And we wanted to preserve this small creek on the side. It's going from the mountain towards these farmers' houses in a village, and it's also running through the building. So in this case, what I want to say is that water is also, even with a very small scale, a small creek running through the space, it's almost like the tracing guidelines or directions, indications in this space, and especially when the whole building is conceived as, with this traditional masonry building technique, and also kind of the articulation of the dark and light. We wanted to create a kind of a sudden drop when you first enter the space into a dark space, almost like you have to adjust yourself to the light conditions in the space, and then you look toward, you're standing in the dark and looking toward the kind of a lighter exhibition or display kind cases or walls. So the whole space is conceived almost like archaeological atmosphere addressed to the indenture history, which is documenting all the lives happened in the past 200 years in this ancient village. So in this dark space, the water becomes, with its acoustical effect, becomes like a very prominent, almost like a dominant experience. When you first enter the space, you hear the sound of the water, the creek running through the this dark indenture space. And we also open up the roof to create this the gap on the rooftop. It collects the rainwater during the rainy days into this creek, but also it's echoing with this creek to become the kind of a direction, you know, the trace directing you into the different compartments, different rooms in this building. And we also embedded some of the small misty mist sprays in this skylight, in this skyline. So in sunny days, in summer, during about 1 hour on around noon, when the light is cutting through the gap directly into the space, it's almost like a blade cutting into, because the treatment of the walls on top of the roof, so that the direct light could only coming into the space during noon, about like 1 hour or so. And together with the mist spray, it's creating kind of a different a different kind of a sensation in the space in a sunny day, and you have the mist, and also it's creating a rainbow effect, and it moves. The rainbow moves when you together with your movement in this space. So for this project, even with the small creek, the motion of the water, the sound of the water, and together with the artificial installation or rainwater, natural rainwater, the different kind of expression or mobility or volume of water could also play a kind of could also change the atmosphere, the sensation in the building. My last project is a recent one, a tea space on top of the mountain in Jining County, which is next to Songyang County. It's in the Sure minority cultural area. This is showing building in different time of the day. Basically, it's just a very simple rectangular box on top of this small terrace in the mountain. And you can read from this axon. It's cut through in the center with the walkway, and also with these 8 tunnels, light tunnels injecting into the space. These light tunnels, the 8 light tunnels, are actually representing the 7 hours, Chinese hours, during the summer solstice time. So in this case, we want to argue that the building, kind of a tea space, has its cultural, spiritual metaphor. On top of the mountain, there's a temple, religious temple in this region. So we want this space to be, instead of only producing the tea, right? It could also become a media to represent the Zen or the spirits of tea, of culture in general. So we took this as we took the summer solstice time as, you know, this is the day when you have the maximum length of the daytime, the daylight in the whole year. And there are countless religious activity or cultural ceremonies addressed to this special day of the year when the sun reaches maximum altitude. And so we took this special day as kind of a celebration of the year, and instead of taking 24 hours, we used the Chinese 12 hours, which has more kind of a meaning because it's based 12 hours. Basically, it's one Chinese hour equals 2 hours. But basically, it's representing the activity patterns of different animals. So by addressing to the Chinese hours, we also wanted this to be kind of a metaphor that it's related with the nature, with not only human being, but also all lives as a whole in our world, in our universe. So the 7 hours, let's go back to the 8 light tubes. It's representing 7 hours from the sunset, sunrise, rabbit hour in the morning, dragon, snake, horse. I think horse is the noon time, so it has 2 tubes at the end of the building, and then the goat hour, monkey hour, rooster hour as the sun set. There's a lot of cultural information in this project, in this simple and small project. But anyway, all these light tubes are intersecting with the rectangular program volume, which is divided by the central walkway into half. One is the tea tasting tea house, right, facing the landscape, and the other part is the tea production space. And if you look at the tea production space, the workshop is divided by the light, by the different hours based on its production sequence. And this is a central walkway for the, it's enlarged walkway or lounge for the visitors. So the building's looking from one side, it's wrapped with this, the bottom is wrapped with this perforated bricks with the tubes extruding out to the roof. When you work all these different hours, like I said, the light tubes, it's indicating the different Chinese hours during the summer solstice day, almost as the light is frozen or the time is frozen. But if you, it's representing the sun angles during its certain hours. But it only allows the light coming into the space one by one during the summer solstice day, or like 1 month on and off during 1 month around that season or that time of the year. And the light tubes almost become a frozen statue coming above the water, above the roof, with this water bed. And if you turn around to the other side of the building, when it's facing the mountain and facing the county at the bottom, or at the foot of the mountain, it's shifting into almost open and transparent. So the water surface on the rooftop, and together with the kind of a glass curtain wall, it becomes the volume, the rectangular volume itself almost disappeared. That's the interior workshop tea production space. The sequence is defined by the different time of the hour of the day, different hour of the day. And like I said in the beginning, this is the region with the Sher minority, and this is the culture. They didn't have the text like we have. It's rather the hieroglyph. Like the images of the different elements: land, tree, sun, cloud, wind, or water. So we took these paragraph and cultivated into this perforation of the bricks. It becomes the sunshade, like the shading system, but also a cultural image. And if you can read from the level, the elevation, it's from top to the bottom. It's sun, clouds. All the elements is based on its own elevation in the nature, in real. And it becomes a kind of a cultural background image in a whole space. This is the central visitor lounge. So when the interior space is rather kind of a designed, articulated into almost like a cave space. On the contrary, the rooftop becomes an open ceremonial platform with the water surface reflecting the mountain, the surrounding, the sky, and the 8 light tunnels extruding out from the water surface becomes the sculpture. Like I said, it's almost like the sunlight is frozen, the time is frozen on top of the roof. Walkway from south to north. At the south, it's facing to the gate of the temple in the mountain. It's different time of the day. So in a way, in this building, when it's accommodating the practical program needs as architectural requirements, functional requirements, the building itself, with this kind of a different layer of cultural metaphor or cultural elements, messages, the building itself becomes a monument, a kind of a monument, as a statue addressed to our nature, to our culture, and our ancient tradition as well. Thank you. That's all from me for today.
Thanks, Tian, for your presentation and for this refined sensibility, I think, towards the place, both from the geographical and historical point of view, but also for the social situation that you found. I think you demonstrated an exemplary strategy for facing a problem that is interesting several endangered parts of the Chinese territory. So this is, I think, a very good practice, a good example in considering the place in all its aspects.